Hello today. Slightly different subject. I might come up with another video later. Interesting enough talking point, let's say. A long article in the Baffler by David Graeber. David Graeber of The First 5,000 Years of Debt, which on second read through I found to be a very, very good book. First read through I thought it was a bit bitty, but reading it second time I could see that he had a concept and made it very worthwhile. This is a very, very long article in the Baffler, and I'm just going to pick out bits. It might seem long, but if you reference the link, you'll find that it's a little pamphlet in its own right. So, of flying cars and the declining rate of profit. So I'm not going to get to everything like the declining rate of profit, but it's in there if you want to follow the link. So I've just started towards the top to give us an idea about what he is talking about. Where, in short, are the flying cars? Yeah, so you've got it already, hopefully. Where, in short, are the flying cars? Where are the force fields, tractor beams, teleportation pods, anti-gravity sleds, tricorders, immortality drugs, colonies on Mars, and all the other technical wonders any child growing up in the mid to late 20th century assumed would exist by now? Even those inventions that seemed ready to emerge, like cloning or cryogenics, ended up betraying their lofty promises. What happened to them all? We are informed of the wonders of computers, as if this is some sort of unanticipated compensation, but in fact we haven't moved even computing to the point of progress that people in the 50s expected we'd have reached by now. We don't have computers we can have an interesting conversation with, or robots that can walk our dogs or take our clothes to the laundromat. Not, I think, that we'd want that, would we? But you can imagine in the 50s they had computers, and the projection was that we'd have more to do with our computers now than what we actually do, which is clever, but it's not mind-blowingly clever. I'm taking bits out, so this is a great leap on, etc., etc. Even in the 70s and 80s, in fact, sober sources such as National Geographic and the Smithsonian were informing children of imminent space stations and expeditions to Mars. Creators of science fiction movies used to come up with concrete dates, often no more than a generation in the future, in which to place their futuristic fantasies. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick felt that a movie-going audience would find it perfectly natural to assume that only 33 years later, in 2001, we would have commercial moon flights, city-like space stations and computers with human personalities maintaining astronauts in suspended animation while travelling to Jupiter. Video telephony is just about the only new technology from that particular movie that has appeared, and it was technically possible when the movie was showing back in '68. I think I'll throw in, because he says that he did the calculation when he was at school how old he would be in the year 2000, and then the young imagination goes to what the world will be like. And I remember, I've got one of these flashbulb memories of doing exactly the same thing, and quite a lot of that day, because it was quite an important day for me. I certainly remember coming home from school, because it was at school I had this thought and did the calculation. I remember doing the calculation with a pencil and paper, how old I would be in the year 2000. And I remember my trip home from school was quite a long one at that particular time. It was a kind of a 20-minute, half-hour walk, then a bus ride, and then a train ride, and then another bus ride, and then another walk. And all of that time I remember thinking, looking at things and going, how will this be in the year 2000? How will that be in the year 2000? And I was not very optimistic. a lot of the bus ride was through the back streets of Liverpool, you could say. And I'd look down on these 2 up, 2 downs with a yard at the back and a lane, an alley going up between the yards. And I thought, well, will they be there in the year 2000, or will they all be knocked down and everything will be new, modern, whatevers? And I remember deciding through the dirty window of the bus from the top deck of the bus that they'd still be there. And strangely that day I didn't take the train, I took the boat. And I was thinking, well, I was quite reasonably practical about it. It is the way anyway that this boat now will in the year 2000. I thought, no, it'll be at least a hovercraft or one of those hydroplane things that got up quickly. But then I was calculating, must have been reasonably bright, I suppose, how many passengers extra and extra fuel it would take to use the extra effort to get across, as opposed to this big old steel bucket, which had a wonderful cafeteria in it, which sold the most disgusting tea ever invented. But it was wonderful because it was really always very warm, because I suppose it was near the engine room. Oh, shut up, Nick. Anyway, right, let's move on. Technically possible when the movie was showing. And what was that? Video telephony. The rest of it, nowhere near. Right, what happened? This is link number 4. What happened instead is that the spread of information technologies and new ways of organising transport, the containerisation of shipping, for example, allowed those same industrial jobs. We've kind of moved now into the melding of futuristic stuff and economic reality. The containerisation of shipping, for example, allowed those same industrial jobs to be outsourced to East Asia, Latin America and other countries, where the availability of cheap labour allowed manufacturers to employ much less technologically sophisticated production line techniques than they would have been obliged to employ at home. From the perspective of those living in Europe, North America and Japan, the results did seem to be much as predicted. Smokestack industries did disappear. Jobs came to be divided between a lower stratum of service workers and an upper stratum sitting in antiseptic bubbles playing with computers. But below it all lay an uneasy awareness that the post-work civilization was a giant fraud. Our carefully engineered high-tech sneakers were not being produced by an intelligent cyborg or self-replicating molecular nanotechnology. They were being made on the equivalent of old-fashioned Singer sewing machines by the daughters of Mexican and Indonesian farmers who, as the result of WTO or NAFTA-sponsored trade deals, had been ousted from their ancestral lands. Jump again, number 5. Why did the project explosion of technological growth everyone was expecting, the moon bases, the robot factories, fail to happen? There are 2 possibilities. Either our expectations about the pace of technological change were unrealistic, in which case we need to know why so many intelligent people believed that they were not, or our expectations were not unrealistic, in which case we need to know what happened to derail so many credible ideas and prospects. Another jump, number 6. In fact, even as those dreams were being outlined, the material base for their achievement was beginning to be whittled away. There is reason to believe that even by the 50s and 60s, the pace of technological innovation was slowing down from the heady pace of the first half of the century. There was a last spate in the 50s when the microwave oven, 1954, the pill, 1957, and lasers, 1958, all appeared in rapid succession, but since then technological advances have taken the form of clever new ways of combining old existing technologies, as in the space race, and new ways of putting existing technologies to consumer use. The most famous example is television, invented in 1926, but mass-produced only after the war. Yet, in part because the space race gave everyone the impression that remarkable advances were happening, the popular impression during the 60s was that the pace of technological change was speeding up at a terrifying, uncontrollable way. But it wasn't, and it hasn't been since. Last one. Contemporary cruise missiles are accurate by comparison to what he talked of earlier, obviously. Still, precision weapons never do seem capable of assassinating specific individuals, Saddam, Osama or Gaddafi, even when hundreds are dropped. And ray guns have not materialized, surely not for lack of trying. We can assume the Pentagon has spent billions on death ray research, but the closest they've come so far are lasers that might, if aimed correctly, blind an enemy gunner looking directly at the beam. Aside from being unsporting, this is pathetic. Lasers are a 50s technology. Phasers that can be set to stun do not appear to be on the drawing boards. And when it comes to infantry combat, the preferred weapon almost everywhere remains the AK-47, a Soviet designed and named for the year it was introduced, 1947. Comments?